When I got the call that my daughter had collapsed in school, I didn't panic, I shattered. Because I knew the only thing that could bring her to the edge of death so quickly was if someone had touched her oxygen tube. I never imagined a teacher would be the one who tried to end my daughter's life. Before watching full story, comment below from where you're watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The day started like any other. I packed Emma's lunch, checked her backpack, and carefully adjusted the transparent oxygen tube that wrapped around her cheeks and nestled behind her ears. 8 years old, and already my daughter had endured more hospital visits, surgeries, and sleepless nights than most people experience in a lifetime. Born with a rare and aggressive condition, pulmonary arterial hypertension, Emma's lungs couldn't properly carry oxygen to her body. The tube she wore wasn't optional, it was her lifeline. "Mommy," she said, her little voice hesitant, "do you think the kids will ask about my tube again today?" I knelt down, brushing her blonde curls away from her face. Her bright blue eyes, so full of light and yet shadowed by worry, looked straight into mine. "If they do, just tell them it helps you breathe better, sweetheart. That's it. And remember, you're the bravest girl I know." Emma smiled, but I could still feel the tension in her small hands as she clutched mine. This was only her third week of third grade at Lincoln Elementary. Most kids were kind, curious, sometimes a bit awkward. But like always, there were a few who didn't understand, who laughed or stared or whispered cruel things when they thought she wasn't listening. That day, I walked her into class like I always did. Her usual teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, stood at the door, smiling warmly as she spotted us. But I noticed something immediately, a stiffness in her shoulders, a wrinkle in her brow. Something was off. "Everything okay?" I asked. Mrs. Rodriguez glanced at Emma, then leaned in to speak quietly. "Mrs. Patterson, we have a substitute today. Mrs. Henderson called in sick last night." "Okay," I said slowly. "Is that a problem?" She hesitated. I briefed her about Emma's condition, of course. I explained the medical documentation, the need for the oxygen. But what? She didn't take it seriously. Said she's seen kids exaggerate things like this before. She used the phrase, special accommodations culture. A chill ran through my spine. "You're saying she doesn't believe Emma needs oxygen?" Mrs. Rodriguez bit her lip. "Her name is Karen Wilson. She's subbed here before, old school type. Very set in her ways." I felt the anger boiling beneath my skin. I was ready to march straight into the principal's office and raise hell. But then Emma tugged on my sleeve. "It's okay, Mommy, I'll be fine. Mrs. Rodriguez is here. She always watches me." Mrs. Rodriguez gave me a reassuring nod. "I'll stay close to the classroom today. I won't let anything happen." I kissed Emma's forehead and forced myself to walk away. But everything in me screamed that something was wrong. As a mother, you learn to trust those instincts. And that morning, mine were louder than they'd ever been. 3 hours later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, heart already racing. "Mrs. Patterson?" "Yes, this is Principal Johnson from Lincoln Elementary. You need to come to the school immediately." My blood ran cold. "What happened? Is Emma okay? Please just come quickly." "She's in the nurse's office. There's been an incident." I don't remember how I got to the school. I only remember sprinting down the hall, teachers and students blurring past me as I raced to the nurse's office. A crowd had already gathered. I heard crying, sharp, panicked gasps that sent chills through my bones. And then I saw her. Emma sat on the nurse's table, lips tinged blue, her tiny hands trembling. In her lap 2 shredded pieces of plastic tubing. Her oxygen tube, cut clean in half. "Emma," I rushed to her side, grabbing her hand, touching her face, checking her pulse. "Jommy," she sobbed. Struggling to speak between gasps, she said I was lying. She said I was faking being sick just to get attention. She took scissors and cut my tube. She couldn't breathe. She was suffocating, and someone had intentionally done this to her. "Who did this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Principal." Johnson stepped forward, face grim. "Mrs. Karen Wilson. She's been removed from the classroom and is waiting in my office." "She what?" I exploded. She believed Emma was exaggerating. She thought it was for attention. "Someone tried to murder my daughter, and you're telling me she's just waiting in your office?" "We've called paramedics. We're doing everything we can." I watched as EMTs rushed in, attached an emergency oxygen tank, and began stabilizing Emma's breathing. Mrs. Rodriguez stood in the corner, tears in her eyes, her hands still shaking. She had been the one to call 911. She had saved my daughter's life. But what I didn't know yet, what no one had told me, was just how far this substitute teacher had gone in her twisted, cruel belief that my child was a liar. The full story came together like shattered glass bit by painful bit, each shard sharper than the last. As Emma's oxygen levels stabilized and her hands finally stopped trembling, I sat by her side in the nurse's office while Principal Johnson explained what had happened. "She questioned Emma several times this morning about the tube," he said softly, not meeting my eyes. "Made her stand up in front of the class to explain herself. We've spoken to several students already." "She what?" I whispered. she told the class. Sometimes kids pretend to be sick to get out of work. When Emma got upset and cried, Mrs. Wilson accused her of putting on a show. I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. Then came the part that nearly made me lose control. At recess, Emma had been playing quietly with two other girls near the edge of the playground. According to witnesses mind you, Mrs. Wilson walked up and said, "I've been watching you. You run around just fine. You laugh and play like every other kid. This tube is just for attention, isn't it?" Emma had tried to explain, tried to say that the oxygen helped her do those things that without it, she couldn't. But Karen Wilson wasn't interested in the truth. In front of 23 children, she leaned forward, pulled the oxygen tube top between her fingers and cut it with a pair of classroom scissors. "There," she said. "Let's see how sick you really are." The horror on the kids' faces, the screaming, the chaos. It was Mrs. Rodriguez who found Emma on the ground, face turning blue, her little hands clawing at the air. And it was Mrs. Rodriguez who started emergency CPR and shouted for someone to call 911. By the time I'd arrived, my daughter had come inches from death, and Karen Wilson had calmly walked back to the classroom like nothing had happened. I couldn't hold back anymore. "I want to speak to her," I growled. "Right now." Principal Johnson hesitated. "Mrs. Patterson, please now." Reluctantly, he led me down the hall to a conference room, where Mrs. Wilson was waiting with the school district's attorney seated beside her. She looked exactly how I imagined a gray-haired woman in her 50s. Tight bun, stern face like she'd been carved out of cement. Her arms were crossed at face blank. She looked up at me and said, "Mrs. Patterson, I understand you're upset, but I truly believe your daughter is manipulating everyone around her." I blinked. She continued, "I've been teaching for 15 years. I've seen children learn that pretending to be sick gets them sympathy and special treatment. Your daughter is a healthy child who's been taught to act fragile." I tried to stay calm, but my voice cracked under the rage. "Cut her oxygen. You cut her oxygen supply. She has a documented medical condition." I've seen dozens of documented conditions, Karen snapped. These days, every parent wants their kid to be special. ADHD, anxiety, breathing problems, half of it's exaggerated. You people cling to labels. I reached into my bag, grabbed my phone, and pulled up a video. One I had recorded 2 weeks earlier. It was 2 a.m. Emma had fallen asleep without her oxygen concentrator turned on. I had walked into her room and found her unconscious. The footage showed her tiny chest barely rising, her lips a frightening shade of blue, her pulse thready under my fingers. I held the phone up to Karen Wilson's face. "This is my daughter when she doesn't have oxygen," I said. "This is what you almost caused today." She flinched, but only slightly. "Anyone can fake a video. She could be holding her breath. You could have coached her." I snapped. "You evil, delusional Mrs. Patterson." The lawyer interrupted. "Let's all stay civil." "Civil," I shouted. "She tried to kill my child." Karen rolled her eyes. "I didn't try to kill anyone. I removed a prop being used to control adults." Principal Johnson stepped between us. "That's enough." He looked at Karen. "You've made your stance perfectly clear. We'll let the courts decide the rest." That night, I sat in the hospital holding Emma's hand. The doctors wanted to keep her overnight to monitor for any potential brain damage due to oxygen loss. She stirred in her sleep and whispered, "Mommy, I'm here, baby. Why did she hurt me?" I wasn't lying. I need my oxygen. Tears filled my eyes. "I know, sweetheart. I know. Some people are cruel, but I promise you, this will never happen again. Mommy is going to make sure of it." And I meant it. The next morning, I called the best attorney in the state. By lunch, we had filed criminal charges against Karen Wilson for child endangerment, assault, and reckless endangerment. We also filed a civil lawsuit against the school district for negligence and for allowing an unqualified substitute to ride medical accommodations. But just when I thought it couldn't get any more twisted, Karen hit back. 2 days later, I received a certified letter from her lawyer. Karen Wilson was countersuing me for defamation and emotional distress. In her statement, she claimed, "Mrs. Patterson has clearly coached her daughter to fake a condition for sympathy. The child shows no genuine respiratory distress and functions normally. I acted in the child's best interest by removing the attention-seeking device. I am the real victim here." I stared at the paper in disbelief. The woman who had nearly suffocated my daughter was now trying to portray herself as the victim, but she had made one fatal mistake. She had underestimated a mother's fury, and she had no idea just how far I was willing to go to protect my child. The courtroom was packed the day the trial began. Parents, teachers, reporters, advocates for children with medical conditions. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had cut an oxygen tube and nearly killed an 8-year-old girl face justice. Karen Wilson sat at the defendant's table in a gray suit, her lips pressed into a permanent sneer. She looked more like someone about to scold a student for chewing gum than a woman on trial for child endangerment. I sat beside my attorney, my hands clenched in my lap. Emma wasn't in the courtroom that day. She was still recovering. not just physically, but emotionally. But I was there. And I wasn't just a grieving mother. I was fire. I was truth. I was ready to make sure the world saw the monster for what she truly was. The prosecution opened with a bang. They played the school security footage from the playground the exact moment Karen cut Emma's tube. Even knowing what was coming, I felt my stomach twist as I watched the screen. There was Emma, laughing softly as she played a clapping game with two girls. Then Karen, walking over, hovering, speaking harshly. Emma, backing away. Then the scissors, a quick snip, and Emma collapsing. The entire courtroom gasped. But the worst part, the most chilling part, was what Karen did next. Nothing. She didn't call for help. She didn't kneel down. She just stood there, watching. As my daughter gasped for air. Karen folded her arms and watched like she was waiting to be proven right. The prosecution paused the video, letting the silence do what no argument could. Then came the medical testimony. Dr. Sarah Chen, Emma's pulmonologist, took the stand. Focused, devastating. Pulmonary arterial hypertension is a rare and life-threatening condition. She began, without constant oxygen, Emma's lungs cannot circulate blood properly. Within minutes, oxygen deprivation causes her heart to fail. And in your expert opinion, the prosecutor asked, what would have happened had Emma been without oxygen for 5 minutes? Dr. Chen's expression didn't waver. She would have died. The jury shifted uncomfortably. One woman put a hand over her mouth. And is this condition something a child could fake? Absolutely not. Dr. Chen replied, it involves measurable physiological changes, blood, oxygen saturation, heart rate, lung function. You cannot fake those. She paused, then added, Emma isn't dramatic. She's resilient. I've watched her face every test, every treatment with more courage than most adults. Then came Mrs. Rodriguez. She took the stand, with tears in her eyes and a folder full of student reports. I've taught dozens of students over the years, she said, her voice trembling. I've seen kids fake stomachaches, but Emma, never. She doesn't even like talking about her condition. She described finding Emma collapsed on the playground. She was turning blue. I thought she was dying. I had to use CPR. I learned 8 years ago. I never thought I'd need it. She looked toward the defendant's table. I trusted Karen Wilson to care for my students. And she broke that trust in the most horrific way possible. But nothing prepared the courtroom for Emma. We debated whether she should testify. We didn't want to re-traumatize her. But one morning, as I braided her hair, she looked at me and said, I want to tell them what she did. I want them to know I wasn't lying. She took the stand holding her stuffed rabbit and wore her oxygen tube with quiet pride. Emma, the prosecutor asked gently, can you tell us what happened that day? Her voice was soft but clear. She said, I was lying. That I didn't need my tube. Then she cut it, and I couldn't breathe. Everything went fuzzy. It hurt. I thought I was dying. Someone in the back of the courtroom sobbed. I couldn't tell if it was a juror or a stranger. I just held my breath. Did anyone tell you what to say today? The prosecutor asked. Emma blinked. No, I know what happened. I don't need anyone to tell me. I remember it all. And are you really sick? Yes, she said firmly. I don't like being sick. I wish I wasn't. But it's real. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. Karen's attorney stood to cross-examine, but he might as well have stayed seated. Every question he asked only made Emma more believable. Do you ever feel like you get special treatment? He asked. Emma shook her head. No, I just want to play like everyone else. Have you ever pretended to be sicker than you are? I don't pretend, she said. I'm sick every day. It was over before it started. Then it was Karen's turn, taking the stand in her own defense. She showed no remorse. Stand by my actions, she said. I believed the child was faking it. The prosecutor leaned in. Even after seeing her collapse, she was putting on a show. After seeing the footage, children can hold their breath. After seeing the medical reports, doctors get fooled all the time. And if you were wrong, the prosecutor asked. If you were wrong, you could have killed her. Do you understand that? Karen paused, then said the words that will haunt me for the rest of my life. If her condition were real, she'd die from it eventually. I just exposed the truth. Gasps, murmurs. One juror covered her face. The judge slammed his gavel to restore order, but it was too late. She had condemned herself with her own arrogance. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the verdict came swift and sharp. On the charge of first-degree child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of second-degree assault, guilty. On the charge of reckless endangerment, guilty. Karen showed no emotion. She sat as if the courtroom around her didn't matter. Then the judge spoke. Mrs. Wilson, he said, in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen such callous disregard for a child's life. He leaned forward. You were entrusted with the care of children, and you violated that trust in the most disturbing way imaginable. He looked over at me, then at Emma. You cut a child's oxygen supply because you believed you were smarter than her doctors, her teachers, her mother, and the truth itself. You're not a teacher. You're a danger. He slammed his gavel. I hereby sentence you to 5 years in prison, the maximum allowed by law. You are banned from ever working with children again, and you are ordered to pay full restitution for the victim's medical care and trauma counseling." Karen didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't say a word, but justice had been served, and I had one more battle left to win. The courtroom was silent as the judge's words echoed off the walls. 5 years in prison, banned from teaching forever, ordered to pay for every dollar of Emma's care, but no sentence, no punishment could undo what Karen Wilson had done, the trauma she caused, the trust she shattered, the fear she left behind. Justice had been served, yes, but healing, that was a different journey. Emma spent months in therapy. She struggled to go back to school. She jumped at loud noises. She didn't want to take her oxygen off, not even for a second. There were nights when I would wake up to find her in my room, clutching her stuffed rabbit, whispering, "Mommy, what if someone cuts my tube again?" And I would hold her and tell her, "No one will ever hurt you again, baby, I promise." It took time, but Emma didn't just recover, she rose. The civil lawsuit against the school district ended in a victory. 2. They settled for a substantial amount, enough to cover Emma's medical care, future surgeries, counseling, and everything else she would ever need. But more importantly, the case forced the district to completely revise their policies: mandatory training for all substitute teachers on student medical needs, immediate dismissal for anyone who disregards health accommodations, new safety protocols for medically vulnerable children. Karen's teaching license was revoked permanently. Her countersuit against me thrown out. She was ordered to pay my legal fees and publicly labeled for what she was: a danger to children. But none of that compared to what came next. One afternoon, a year later, Emma came home from school with her usual bouncy energy. "Guess what, Mommy?" she said, swinging her backpack onto the couch. "There's a new girl in class. Her name's Sarah, and she has diabetes." I froze. The word hung in the air. "She has to check her blood sugar and give herself insulin," Emma continued. "Some of the kids were being mean. Said she was pretending." My heart sank. "What did you do?" Emma smiled, the kind of smile that told me everything had changed. "I told them it's not fake. I showed them my oxygen tube and told them, Sarah is brave, just like I am. I told them to be kind." She paused, then added, "Now she sits with me at lunch. We talk about medical stuff. She says she doesn't feel weird around me," and I cried, because Emma had turned her pain into purpose. 6 months later, Emma received an award from the local children's hospital for advocacy. She had started a support group at school for kids with chronic conditions. She called it Brave Together. And every Friday during lunch, kids with diabetes, asthma, seizures, and food allergies would sit together, share stories, laugh, cry, and feel normal. At the awards ceremony, Emma stood on stage with her oxygen tube glowing gently under the lights and gave a speech that silenced the room. 2 years ago, she said, "Someone hurt me because they didn't believe I was sick. They thought I was lying, that I wanted attention. It was scary, it made me feel small. But then I learned something. Just because someone doesn't believe you doesn't mean you're not telling the truth. Kids like me, not faking, we're not fragile, we're just trying to live. So please, if a child tells you they need help, listen, believe them, protect them." The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. As for Karen Wilson, she served every day of her sentence. Upon release, she moved out of state, but her criminal record and the nationwide media coverage ensured she never worked in a school again. I heard through the legal grapevine that she still claims she did nothing wrong, still insists Emma was faking. Some people never learn. But Emma learned that being different doesn't make you broken, that your voice matters even when you're small, and that when you speak the truth, the right people will listen. Today, Emma is a teenager. She still wears her oxygen tube. She probably always will, but she wears it with pride. She's a straight-A student, a member of the debate team, and a hospital volunteer. She plans to become a pediatric pulmonologist so she can help kids just like her and me. I learned that a mother's love can move mountains. That when you fight for your child relentlessly, fearlessly, you don't just protect them, you protect all the children who come after. Karen tried to silence Emma, to expose her as a fraud, to strip her of her dignity. Instead, she gave her a mission, and that mission became a movement. Emma didn't just survive, she shattered every label placed on her. She turned trauma into triumph, fear into strength, and cruelty into courage. That's the real ending of this story. Not the courtroom verdict, not the prison sentence, but a little girl with an oxygen tube, becoming a voice for thousands who couldn't speak, a survivor, an advocate, a hero.